Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the P2E migration process in Alma. Please note that the information included in this presentation is periodically reviewed and may be updated. In today's presentation, we are going to discuss the migration process of an institution's physical resources from their legacy integrated library system into electronic resources in Alma. The session will cover the input requirements from your institution, meaning how their resource list should look when submitting it to Ex Libris, the migration processes, and the system business logic behind the conversion of your institution's electronic resources. We will provide a detailed explanation of how the Alma migration process converts resources which were initially migrated as physical into electronic resources in Alma. At the end of the session, three use cases will be presented covering a few different scenarios that library staff may encounter once the migration process has been completed. In the past, legacy integrated library systems had just one structure for handling resources, the physical resource. Although electronic resources became more and more a part of libraries' holdings, they were still added as physical because older ILSs were simply not intended to handle anything else. Because of this, each customer managed their electronic resources in whatever way they chose. For example, some customers may have used a location-based approach, others an internal note next to the resource, or in other cases, using an external management system. In Alma, a physical resource is very different from an electronic resource, and the workflows and structures are not the same. As we will see later on in the presentation, it is vital that a resource which is electronic be properly converted to that resource type in Alma during the migration in order that all subsequent workflows and actions undertaken by library staff are relevant to that resource. In many cases, the same resource may have physical and electronic holdings or items attached to it. We will take a look at such a scenario in one of our cases later on. Based on system logic, Alma determines how to migrate electronic inventory by checking how it was originally set up in your legacy ILS. The system workflow will be discussed later on in this presentation, and we will attempt to provide an in-depth explanation of what the system looks like, what the system looks for, and how it goes about converting physical resources and the process of attaching associated orders to electronic resources. In addition, we will look closely at how the P2E migration process is able to differentiate between physical and electronic resources attached to the same bibliographic record. It is important to note that all inventory will always be assumed to be physical during the migration process unless specified otherwise by your institution in the P2E resource list. Let's take a closer look at how bibliographic records are displayed in Alma. As you can see in the screenshot at the top, this is how a physical resource looks in Alma. The physical resource, or resources if there are multiple copies, will have a physical location listed and their corresponding call numbers beside it. In the event that there are attached items or holdings, hyperlinks to reach them will be present below the resource. The screenshot at the bottom shows how electronic resources look in Alma. Each record has a list of the available electronic resources connected to this record. If the electronic record is not just a stub bibliographic record and also has e-packages connected to it, there will also be hyperlinks to the portfolio list, which will then bring you to a page with further details about the portfolio and provide the associated linking plus additional information regarding coverage, associated licenses, embargoes, and notes. Once the P2E process has been completed, which is what we will cover during this presentation, this is how an electronic collection would look in Alma. In the example on this page, we have a list of electronic packages. As seen in the ledger, when the building-shaped icon is displayed in blue, it indicates an active local record, meaning it is available and can be ordered by the library. When it's grayed out, it indicates an inactive local record, and as such, there is no hyperlink visible. When the icon with the people is visible next to an electronic resource, it indicates the e-resource is global and linked to the community zone. P2E records will not be in this category since by default they are completely local resources because the list of P2E records are provided by each individual institution according to the electronic resources they managed in their legacy ILS. Here's a closer look at the physical resource in Alma. On the main repository search page, you would see a list of bibliographic records in the results relevant to your search term. Once the results are displayed, and in the event that there are holdings and items attached to this resource, there will be hyperlinks to the items and holdings visible below the bibliographic record. The second screenshot shows the list of holdings with their respective library, locations, and call numbers, while the third screenshot shows the list of items with their corresponding barcodes, libraries, locations, and call numbers. Clicking on one of the links on the holdings page will take you to the metadata editor, where editing the record and a variety of other tasks can be performed by library staff. Alternatively, the Actions button can also be used to access the MD editor or perform other actions such as associating a purchase order line or relinking of the holding. From the Items page, a number of actions, such as moving the item by issuing a request, editing general information such as material type, location, barcode, or placing a work order, can be performed by clicking on the Actions button to the right of the listing. Depending on the type of resource and whether it is available in physical format only, electronic format only, or both physical and electronic formats, the Orders page will look like this in Alma. The Orders dropdown, as can be seen in these two screenshots, can be accessed directly from the bibliographic record by clicking on the order hyperlink seen below. In the event that the resource is electronic only, the purchase type options, as seen on the left, may be electronic book, electronic journal, or electronic title, also available one-time standing order as a subscription. If the resource in the library is available in both physical and electronic format, there may be a larger number of order options available. As you can see here, both print, electronic, and database versions are shown in the dropdown. Before the P2E process is performed, the regular migration process of transferring over physical inventory records from your institution's legacy ILS to Alma is completed. So, while certain steps are taken by the migration team to standardize your data for the conversion into Alma acceptable formats, as we mentioned earlier on in the presentation, at this stage in the migration operation, all inventory is assumed to be physical and will be migrated as physical resources only. It will remain that way until the list identifying those resources which are electronic are supplied by your institution and converted in Alma via the P2E process by the migration team. The first requirement for the P2E process is that your institution provide a list of bibliographic identifiers that actually represent electronic resources with their corresponding resource type. There are three and only three resource types that can be used in the P2E file provided by your institution. The first type is portfolio, which is a single title purchased online from a content provider in full text. An example of this would be the Journal of Anthropology or American Journal of Business Education. The second resource type is package, which is a group of portfolios sold together. Packages are often a cherry-picked selection of journals bundled together and offered by vendors depending on their various business models. The third resource type is database, indicated by the letters DB only. An example of this could be the ProQuest Social Science Database or EBSCO Literary Reference Center Database. In Alma terms, this means collections without portfolios, such as abstracting and indexing databases, which may be linked to bibliographic records for discovery purposes. In the screenshots on the bottom, you can see a couple of examples of how an institution's P2E resource file should look when submitted to Ex Libris for conversion. It should be a single column containing the bibliographic identifier followed by the resource type, delimited by comma only, and without a header row. None of the input values should be wrapped in quotation marks or any other special characters. Please note that since all institutions manage their electronic resources differently, and that the bib ID may be stored in different fields and may or may not contain a leading B, it is important to list the bib IDs exactly as they appear in the MARC records you will supply for the migration. If you store bib IDs in the 907A or 035A, then you should list it exactly as it appears there. For institutions switching over from ex libris products, such as Voyager or Aleph, the bib ID often contains the name of your institution's database either as a prefix or suffix, and it is important to include that in the P2E file. The P2E file may be submitted either as a text or Excel CSV file. The first step in the process is for your institution to provide an indication of libraries or locations that represent electronic inventory in the migration form. For all ILSs, with the exception of Aleph, indicating which location is actually holding electronic resources is the way the Alma migration process will know which resources to convert to electronic. Institutions may have a single bibliographic record in multiple formats, so we must know to retrieve only the holding item information for the electronic location and not the physical location. For institutions currently using Aleph, which has a two-tier library location setup, the correct way to do this is to also list the item material types, which designate that an item is an electronic resource. Item material types could be something like ebook, e-resource, or any item material type specified by your institution in the General Information tab of a specific item, independent of whether there are other items that have a different material type. One of the use cases that will be shown at the end of the presentation will show an example of this. The Alma migration process handles multiple URLs or multiple notes attached to a single record by using a system and business logic that attempts to retain the highest level of data integrity from the originating ILS. Whenever there is only one URL found in the 856U subfield of the migrated holding or bib, assuming that subfield U being the standard value that corresponds to the access method and URL scheme, it will be matched on a one-to-one basis to the electronic resource. Please note that the URL is not limited to subfield U and can be whatever field is specified by your institution as containing the electronic link information. In the event that there are multiple URLs found within a single bibliographic record, again, the 856 subfield U or whatever other subfield specified by your institution, we will create separate inventory for each URL, as will be seen in the next slide. Likewise, if we find that there is identical provider name information and/or public notes in the record, for example, 856 subfield Z with Z corresponding to the public note, we will match them to their corresponding 856 U's in sequential order. Here is an example of such a case where there are multiple URL sources for a record in the originating ILS. In this scenario, the institution has defined the following in the P2E section of the questionnaire tab on the migration form. Their electronic linking information is contained within the 856 subfield U. Their node source is an 856Z, and the vendor provider source is 856 subfield 3. As you can see in the first screenshot, there are three different URLs for this record and multiple vendor provider sources. In this case, Emerald, LexisNexis, and ProQuest, along with multiple notes. Once the migration process has been completed, three separate packages will have been created for this record in Alma, as can be seen in the screenshot at the bottom. The conversion of P2E resources in Alma is an automated three-step process. The first step is for the system to determine whether the bib record actually exists in the database containing your institution resources. It is important to note that this validation is conducted against the post-migration resources in Alma of the original conversion process, meaning when everything was migrated as physical, and therefore any records that were rejected during that phase of the migration will result in the bib being rejected during the P2E conversion as well. The second step is for the system to determine the resource level of the record. This means that it will check whether the resource contains items or holdings and if not, it will default to the bibliographic record only. The system always checks for the lowest level, meaning first item, then holding, as can be seen in the hierarchy detailed in the middle of the slide. If there is an electronic item connected with this bibliographic record, the system will take the item. If there is no item, it will take any attached electronic holding. If no items or holdings exist, the system will select the bibliographic record and convert it to an electronic resource. Assuming that your institution has contracted with Ex Libris to have acquisitions included within the scope of the migration project, in the third and final step, the system will check whether there is an associated order record attached to the bibliographic record. We will discuss in more detail later on how exactly the system logic works when selecting the associated order record in the event that one or more active or inactive orders exist. As discussed in the previous slide, if a bibliographic record provided by your institution has no attached electronic holdings or items, we will create a portfolio, package, or database and then associate it with that bib. This means that there is no e-holding or item to convert, but only new e-inventory to be added or associated with that bibliographic record once it is migrated to Alma. In this situation, there may be physical holdings or items attached to the record. However, they will remain untouched in Alma during the P2E process. At the bottom of this slide are two examples of how a bibliographic record without any attached holdings or items would look in the post-P2E migration user interface of Alma. From this point forward, your library staff can now associate new e-inventory with this record. For each P2E record, Alma will check for an associated order record by using the bib holding or item ID to find the location from the corresponding electronic resource list supplied by your institution. It is important to note that Alma allows only one order per inventory record. When there are more than one associated orders for the same resource, for example, there was an e-resource ordered from one vendor, canceled, and then ordered from a different vendor, migration processing will use an open or recent order first. If there are multiple orders found, they will relate to the E order. However, they will remain categorized as physical in Alma. A more detailed explanation of associated order system migration logic will be shown in the next slide. During the associated order record step of the P2E conversion, the system uses certain logic for selecting a specific order. When the criterion is met, the system takes that action and stops. Here you can see the workflow for selecting the associated order record based on order status and order date. In the event that the system finds one or more active orders, it will select the order with the latest send date. If a single order with no electronic location is found, the system will select the single order even if the order is not in an electronic location. If there are multiple associated orders, which are not in any location specified as electronic, the system will not select any order at all. If no active order is found, the system will then search for inactive orders. In this case, the system will take any order associated with this e-location with any inactive status using the latest sent date. If no active order with an e-location is found, the system goes back and applies the same logic used for active orders when there are no orders attached to e-locations. If there is a single inactive order, then take it. If there are multiple inactive orders, then the system does not take any order at all. As Alma intends to store both ILS and link resolver records in one system, the default migration pattern is to identify and eliminate duplicate link resolver records stored in the ILS and presume that the link resolver records will serve as the master post-migration. As seen in the screenshot from the questionnaire tab of the migration form, via the migration process, it is possible to recognize the link resolver records based on the text specified in the 035A. This can be tailored to identify records from any link resolver. There are, however, two exceptions to this default migration pattern of duplicate elimination. The first exception is in the event that there is another record with linked ILS orders, then the link resolver record is transferred as a suppressed record to retain data integrity. The second exception is when the ILS record has no order, it is still migrated in case the bib record also has physical inventory. An example of this could be where a single SFX record managed both electronic and physical holdings or items. In general, the Alma P2E migration process attempts to use the following workflow when handling duplicate electronic records from the link resolver system. The first step is to try and skip the duplicate record altogether. If that cannot be done, then the system will transfer it over as a suppressed record. Finally, if the record cannot be skipped or suppressed, it will be transferred over to Alma as a duplicate and can then be manually cleaned up and deleted using a process we will discuss in the next slide. Here we will briefly discuss the process for handling duplication in Alma following the P2E process. First, we attempt to ensure that the end-user discovery experience, such as in Primo discovery services, is not affected by any duplication by setting it up to automatically dedupe results and combine them where possible. In addition, in most cases, Alma will prefer link resolver versions of e-resources via View It End User Service menu over other non-link resolver ILS versions. At the same time, we try to ensure that there is no data loss by making sure that the relevant order and back office information managed in the originating ILS remains post-migration. This will result in the SFX or other link resolver system version serving as the master for linking, delivery, and discovery, and the ILS non-link resolver version serving as the back office tracking and management master. In the event of link resolver and non-link resolver versions resulting in post-migration duplication, Alma offers ongoing optional and manual back office cleanup. For back office duplication elimination, the following manual steps can be undertaken by your institution. First, you can associate the link resolver and also community zone inventory, if relevant, with the ILS originated order. Second, you can unassociate the ILS originated e-record with the ILS originated order. Third, which is something will be available in a future release of Alma, you can then relink the ILS originated order to the link resolver and community zone bib instead of the ILS originated bib. Lastly, you can then delete the ILS originated inventory, which is not a link resolver record, thereby eliminating the duplication and retaining the full data associated with the ILS originated order. In the next slide, we will look at a use case where a duplicated bibliographic record, meaning one of them being a link resolver record and the other one not, has been migrated, and your institution will then have the option to take steps detailed here in this slide in order to dedupe it in Alma. Each one of these use cases will show how the bibliographic record exists in your originating ILS and how it will look in Alma once the P2E conversion process has been completed. In the first use case shown here, we have duplicate bibliographic records. The one on the left is an originating ILS non-link resolver record with two open orders attached to it, and the one on the right is a link resolver record with an SFX package attached to it, but without associated orders. Once the conversion process has been completed, both of the records will be converted to electronic resources. However, only one of the open orders, which based on associated order system logic discussed earlier, would be migrated. The duplicate link resolver record will also be migrated. If the manual cleanup method discussed in the previous slide is undertaken, the single active order attached to the non-link resolver record can be unassociated from that version and then reassociated to the link resolver record, which will then serve as the master going forward. This is how it would look in the Alma interface before the conversion. we have the stub link resolver bibliographic record in Alma before the P2E process at the top, and the other non-link resolver bibliographic record with two associated open orders at the bottom. Here you have a screenshot from the interface showing the two orders associated with the single non-link resolver record and the stub link resolver record at the bottom. Once the P2E process has been completed, the two bibliographic records both remain in Alma. The first record, shown at the top, now has only one associated order record, while the other bib, the link resolver record, has also been migrated and linked to the community zone. Using the manual deduplication we discussed earlier, you can have the order from the non-link resolver record connected to the link resolver bib, and your institution can delete that record via the MD editor. In this use case, we have a single bibliographic record included in the P2E resource file provided by your institution. This record is not a link resolver record and therefore, by default, will not be connected to the community zone. As can be seen, at this stage we have two physical items connected to the record. Based on your institution's indication of which locations are electronic, the migration process knows that only one of them should be converted to electronic, while the other should remain physical in Alma. As seen on the right, after the P2E process has been completed, the item associated with the electronic location becomes electronic, while the item in the physical location remains as a physical item in Alma. Here you can see an example of use case 2, which is relevant for all ILSs except for Aleph. In the top screenshot, taken from the Alma UI, we have two physical copies associated with the record in Alma. In the lower screenshot from the Location tab of the migration form, main library has been identified as a physical location, while the other library has been identified as an electronic location. Once the P2E process has been completed, the item which has been associated with an electronic location has been converted to electronic and can now be accessed in Alma by clicking on the electronic version link, while the physical resource has remained physical and is viewable with its library and call number under the availability section of the record. Our last use case is relevant for institutions migrating over from Aleph to Alma. Unlike all other ILSs whose P2E resources are migrated solely based on the locations that have been identified as electronic, institutions moving over from Aleph, where a two-level system is in place, can integrate on the migration form both electronic locations and electronic material types. As seen here, we have a single bibliographic record with two attached items. One of them is a physical item in a library location with non-E material type, while the other physical item is in a library location with the e-material type of ebook. This is how the customer submitted their migration form. Main has been listed as an electronic location, and ebook has been listed as an electronic material type. Here's a closer look at the holding item level for this bibliographic record. There's the physical title in Alma with one holding and 3 items attached. When we take a closer look at the individual items attached to this bibliographic record, you can see that there are 2 different material types assigned, even though they are all linked to the same location, main library. There are two items with the material type book, while the third is material type ebook. As the P2E process for resources originating from Aleph allow for conversion based on material type as well, just the item with material type ebook will be converted to electronic, while the other 2 will remain physical. And this is how the record will look in Alma once the 2-tier P2E migration process has been implemented. For more information on the electronic migration approach to Alma, please refer to the Electronic Resource Handling in Alma Migration document located on the Documentation Center under Alma Migration. Thank you for watching this presentation on the migration of P2E resources in Alma.